Imagine, a perfect, elegant white diplomat's wife in Manhattan starts private Swahili lessons with a tall, dominant African refugee. At first it's just language. But very soon she's on her knees, whispering, "Mimi and I mali ya bwana wangu, I am the property of my master." And then, at the most important diplomatic reception of the year, she looks straight at the black waiter and says it out loud in front of everyone. I sat in our spacious apartment on Manhattan, gazing out at the New York skyscrapers that twinkled like distant stars against the evening sky. The city lights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the modern kitchen where I stirred my tea slowly, the spoon clinking softly against the porcelain cup. My husband, James, was at the stove, flipping steaks with practiced ease, the sizzle filling the air with a savory aroma. He was animated as he spoke about our upcoming trip to Africa, his voice carrying that familiar enthusiasm that had drawn me to him years ago. "This will be a real breakthrough in my career, darling. You know how crucial it is for a diplomat to connect on the local level, especially with the language." I nodded, a gentle smile playing on my lips, my light blonde hair cascading over my shoulders in soft waves. It felt like just another ordinary evening in our life together. The day had unfolded in its usual rhythm, starting with a leisurely breakfast at a bustling cafe on Times Square, where the neon signs and hurried crowds provided a vibrant backdrop to our quiet conversation. We had strolled through Central Park afterward, the autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet like whispered secrets, the crisp air invigorating and full of promise. Squirrels darted across paths lined with golden foliage, and joggers passed by in a blur of determination. I had always felt so secure in this world of endless energy, the honking taxis, the distant hum of subways, the sheer scale of the city that made our problem seem small. James had held my hand as we walked, his touch reassuring, a reminder of the stability we had built over the years. Now, back home, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, planting a soft kiss on my cheek, his cologne mingling with the scent of dinner. "You should pick up at least the basics of Swahili, Anna. It'll make the trip smoother for both of us. I found a tutor. He's a refugee, but word is he's an outstanding teacher." I agreed without a second thought, my mind still lingering on the peaceful day we'd shared. As the evening wound down, we enjoyed a quiet dinner by candlelight, the flames flickering gently on the table between us. James talked more about his work at the embassy, his eyes lighting up with ambition, while I listened, content in the familiarity of our routine. The steak was perfectly cooked, paired with a glass of red wine that warmed me from within. We laughed about small things, a funny incident from his day, my observations from the park, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly aligned. After clearing the plates, James excused himself to his home office, mentioning some emails he needed to handle before bed. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the living room with the soft hum of the city outside. I picked up my phone idly, scrolling through notifications, when a new message popped up from an unknown number. It was from the tutor, tomorrow at 10. Be prepared to submit to the lessons. The word submit lingered on the screen, heavy and out of place, sending a subtle chill down my spine as I stared at it, the room suddenly feeling a tad cooler. I set the phone down, trying to shake off the unease, but it clung to me like the faint fog rolling in from the Hudson. Why that particular phrasing? It seemed odd for a language tutor, almost commanding in a way that didn't fit the casual context James had described. I glanced toward the office door, hearing the faint tapping of keys from within, and wondered if I should mention it. But no, it was probably just a translation quirk or a cultural difference. After all, he was a refugee from Africa, and English might not be his first language. Still, the message disrupted the harmony of the evening, introducing a sliver of doubt into my otherwise serene world. I poured myself another cup of tea, the steam rising in lazy curls, and tried to refocus on the book I'd been reading, but my thoughts kept drifting back to those words. The apartment, with its sleek minimalist design, white walls adorned with abstract art we'd collected on our travels, usually felt like a sanctuary high above the chaos below. Tonight, though, the vast windows seemed to expose us more than protect, the city lights now appearing watchful rather than welcoming. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling a slight tremor, not from cold but from an inexplicable anticipation. James emerged briefly to say goodnight, his smile warm and unsuspecting, pecking me on the forehead before retreating to bed. I lingered in the kitchen, replaying the day in my mind, the laughter in the cafe, the rustle of leaves in the park, the comfort of his embrace. Yet that single message had cast a shadow, subtle but insistent, making me question what lay ahead. As I finally turned off the lights and headed to the bedroom, the word echoed in my thoughts, submit. It felt like a harbinger, disrupting the peaceful narrative of our life. The city outside continued its relentless pulse, indifferent to my growing disquiet. I slipped under the covers beside James, who was already asleep, his breathing steady and calm. Staring at the ceiling, I felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar, a mix of curiosity and apprehension that kept sleep at bay for hours. Tomorrow would bring clarity, I told myself, but deep down, I sensed the beginning of a shift, one that might unravel the threads of our contented existence. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the first hints of light crept over the skyline, I reflected on how far we'd come. James and I had met in college, bonded over shared dreams of adventure and impact. His diplomatic career had taken us to this glittering metropolis, where every day blended luxury with purpose. I had embraced the role of supportive wife, attending events, hosting dinners, all while nurturing my own interests in art and literature. Learning Swahili seemed like a natural extension, a way to share in his world more fully. Yet that message lingered, a discordant note in our symphony. When morning finally arrived, I rose early, the city awakening with me, sirens in the distance, the aroma of fresh coffee brewing. I prepared for the day, dressing in a simple blouse and jeans, my hair tied back, ready to face whatever the lesson entailed. Arriving at the designated spot, a quaint coffee shop in Midtown, the air was thick with the scent of pastries and espresso. I ordered a latte and found a corner table, my heart beating a little faster than usual. At precisely 10, he entered, tall, with a commanding presence, his dark skin contrasting against the neutral tones of the cafe. He introduced himself as Kwaku, but insisted on being called teacher. Jambo, he said, his voice deep and resonant, explaining it meant hello in Swahili. We began with basics, greetings, numbers, simple phrases. His teaching style was firm, correcting my pronunciation with precision, his eyes intense as they met mine. I repeated after him, feeling a strange thrill in the unfamiliar sounds rolling off my tongue. By the end of the session, I had a notebook full of notes, my mind buzzing with new words. As I walked home through the crowded streets, the skyscrapers towering above, I felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with that lingering unease from the night before. James would be pleased, I thought, imagining his proud smile when I shared my progress. Yet, as I entered our apartment, the message's shadow returned, whispering of depths I hadn't anticipated. The day resumed its normalcy, lunch preparations, a call to a friend, but underneath, a subtle current had begun to flow, pulling me toward unknown waters. The next morning, I found myself in a cozy little coffee shop just a few blocks from our apartment, nestled in a vibrant neighborhood where the scents of sizzling street food, falafel, hot dogs, and exotic spices, mingled with the constant rumble of passing cars and honking taxis. The place was quaint, with worn wooden tables and the hum of an espresso machine in the background, patrons chatting in a mix of languages that reflected the city's diversity. I arrived early, my heart still carrying a faint echo of last night's unease from that peculiar message, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the excitement of starting something new. Sipping my latte, I watched people hurry by outside, their coats flapping in the autumn breeze, and wondered what this tutor would be like. Time ticked slowly, and when he was 5 minutes late, I felt a twinge of annoyance mixed with anticipation. He entered with a purposeful stride, tall and imposing, his deep voice cutting through the ambient noise as he approached my table. Jambo, he said, pulling out the chair opposite me and sitting down with an air of quiet authority. He explained that it meant hello in Swahili, his pronunciation rich and melodic, carrying hints of distant lands. His name was Kwaku, he told me, but he preferred to be addressed simply as teacher. It set a formal tone right from the start. His presence was commanding, with broad shoulders and eyes that seemed to hold stories untold, perhaps from his life as a refugee. I nodded politely, introducing myself, and we dove into the lesson without further delay, spreading out notebooks and a small phrasebook on the table amidst the clatter of cups and saucers. The session began with the fundamentals, basic greetings like habari yako for how are you, numbers from 1 to 10, and everyday words such as chakula for food or maji for water. Teacher spoke slowly at first, enunciating each syllable, then had me repeat after him, correcting my inflections with a firm but patient demeanor. My accent, shaped by years on the East Coast, came out soft and rounded, sometimes stumbling over the clicks and rolls that felt foreign on my tongue. I concentrated intently, jotting down notes, feeling a spark of intellectual challenge that I hadn't experienced in a while amid my routine social obligations. By the end, my mind was buzzing with new vocabulary, and as he packed up, he nodded approvingly, saying we'd meet again soon. That evening, back in our apartment, James arrived home from the embassy with his usual briefcase in hand, loosening his tie as he kissed me hello. The kitchen filled with the aroma of the pasta I was preparing, steam rising from the pot like a comforting veil. Over dinner, he casually asked, "How did the lesson go today?" I paused, twirling my fork, and replied, "It was interesting." He's strict, but effective, really knows how to drill in the basics. James smiled, pleased, pouring us both more wine and launching into stories from his day, oblivious to the subtle undercurrent in my thoughts. I felt a quiet satisfaction in sharing this small achievement, yet a part of me lingered on teacher's intense gaze during the session. Lying in bed that night, with James snoring softly beside me, I stared at the shadows dancing on the ceiling from the city lights outside. My mind replayed moments from the coffee shop, the way teacher's eyes had fixed on me as I pronounced words, appraising, almost probing deeper than just my language skills. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it stirred something unfamiliar, a sense of being truly seen, evaluated beyond the surface. The room was warm under the duvet, yet I pulled the covers closer, pondering how this new routine might fit into our life, the lessons promising more than mere words. The following sessions fell into a rhythm, meeting twice a week in serene spots around the city that offered a respite from the urban frenzy. One afternoon, we convened in the grand reading room of the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, surrounded by towering bookshelves and the hushed whispers of scholars. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes in the air as teacher guided me through verb conjugations and simple sentences. His voice, low to avoid disturbing others, carried a weight that made each word feel significant. I repeated phrases diligently, my confidence growing with each correct response, the historic ambience adding a layer of gravitas to our exchanges. Another time, we chose a bench in Bryant Park, amid the greenery and the chatter of office workers on lunch breaks. Pigeons cooed nearby, and the fountain's gentle splash provided a soothing backdrop as teacher introduced intonations, emphasizing how tone could alter meaning in Swahili. He had me practice commands, sima for speak, drawing out the vowel to show emphasis, simama for stand, insisting on the crisp consonants. I stood and sat on cue, feeling a bit silly at first but soon appreciating the physicality of language learning. Passers-by glanced curiously, but in the anonymity of the city, it felt private, just us immersed in this linguistic world. Progress came steadily, and I began incorporating Swahili words into my daily thoughts, murmuring them while shopping on Madison Avenue or during yoga sessions in our building's gym. James noticed, complimenting me one morning over breakfast as he scanned the newspaper, "You're picking it up fast, Anna. Keep this up, and you'll be chatting with locals in no time." His praise warmed me, reinforcing my efforts, and I shared snippets from the lessons, careful to keep it light. Yet, beneath the surface, a subtle shift was occurring, the commands lingering in my mind like echoes. One crisp afternoon, we met in an empty back room of a quiet cafe in Chelsea, the space dimly lit with the scent of fresh-baked bread wafting in from the front. Teacher arrived with a more focused agenda, reviewing previous material before introducing advanced elements. As I struggled with a particularly tricky phrase, frustration built, my cheeks flushing with effort. That's when he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a commanding whisper, "Now obey. Tazama chini, look down." The words hung in the air, laden with an intensity that transcended mere instruction. I complied without thinking, lowering my gaze to the tabletop, my pulse quickening at the unexpected shift in dynamic. The room seemed to narrow, the outside world fading as tension thickened, electric and unspoken. It was just a language exercise, I told myself, but the act of obedience stirred a deep, unspoken resonance, leaving me breathless. When I looked up, his expression was unreadable, and we continued as if nothing had changed, yet an aftertaste of mystery lingered, seeping into my thoughts like ink into paper. Walking home through the bustling streets, the encounter replayed in my mind, the command echoing amid the honks and chatter. Why had it felt so charged? Was it the cultural difference, or something more personal in his teaching style? I stopped at a corner store for flowers, their vibrant petals a distraction, but the unease followed me, blending with a curious thrill. By the time I reached our building, the doorman greeting me warmly, I had compartmentalized it, attributing it to the novelty of immersion. That evening, as James and I attended a gallery opening in Soho, surrounded by abstract paintings and mingling guests, my thoughts drifted back to the lesson. Sipping champagne, I smiled at compliments on my dress, but internally, the word obey pulsed like a secret. James networked effortlessly, his hand on my back a familiar anchor, yet I felt a subtle detachment, the day's events creating a private space in my psyche. Over the next sessions, the pattern evolved, with teacher incorporating more role-play to build fluency. In a secluded corner of Washington Square Park, under arching trees, he had me respond to scenarios, ordering food, asking directions, always with that firm guidance. His appraisals grew more pointed, praising precision while correcting lapses, fostering a sense of achievement laced with dependence on his approval. I found myself anticipating these meetings, the challenge invigorating amid my otherwise predictable days. One rainy afternoon in a borrowed study room at a community center, the downpour pattering against windows, tension mounted as I faltered on complex sentences. Teacher's patience held, but his instructions sharpened, weaving commands into the fabric of learning. Fanya Hivio, do it, he said, and I adjusted my posture, the obedience becoming second nature. The session ended on a high note, yet the undercurrent remained, a subtle pull toward uncharted emotional territory. James continued to encourage, one night over takeout Chinese in our living room, the city skyline glittering beyond. You're glowing with this, Anna. It's good to see you engaged. His words bolstered me, but I withheld the nuances, the way lessons now carried an edge of intensity. Lying awake later, rain still falling, I pondered the growing intrigue, the mystery unfolding word by word. As weeks passed, the city transitioned toward colder days, leaves turning fiery hues. Lessons in varied venues, a quiet bookstore cafe, a bench overlooking the East River, built layers of vocabulary and nuance. Teachers' stories of Africa slipped in occasionally, hints of his past adding depth, making the language feel alive. I absorbed it eagerly, my progress evident in casual conversations with James, who beamed with pride. Yet, that pivotal moment in the cafe lingered, a benchmark where obedience transcended linguistics. In subsequent meetings, similar commands appeared sporadically, each time thickening the air with unspoken implications. I obeyed instinctively now, the act fostering a secretive bond, one that seeped into dreams and daytime reveries. One evening, after a particularly demanding session in a dimly lit lounge, I returned home with a flush I attributed to the chill outside. James noticed, teasing gently, but I deflected, preserving the enigma. The mystery had taken root, promising revelations that both excited and unnerved me. Reflecting in the quiet of our apartment, with jazz playing softly, I realized how the lessons were reshaping not just my speech, but my perceptions. Teacher's gaze, once merely appraising, now felt like a key unlocking hidden facets. The city buzzed on, indifferent, as I navigated this internal evolution. The routine solidified, twice-weekly immersions becoming highlights amid embassy functions and social luncheons. In Central Park once more, amid joggers and dog walkers, teacher drilled imperatives, and Delia, continue, pushing my limits. Obedience wove through, subtle yet potent, leaving traces of anticipation for what lay ahead. James's support remained steadfast, sharing articles on African diplomacy over breakfast, encouraging my dedication. Yet, the private thrill of those charged moments grew, a secret current beneath our harmonious life. As autumn deepened, the lessons intensified, teacher introducing cultural contexts that enriched the words. In a small art gallery's back room, surrounded by African sculptures, he commanded, "Sikiliza, listen," and I did, absorbing not just language but essence. The tension, ever present, hinted at depths unexplored, seeping further into my consciousness. One final session before a brief hiatus, in a serene tea house, culminated in a review where obedience framed the exercises. "Tazama Ju, look up," he said, and as I did, the mystery's aftertaste intensified, promising more in the sessions to come. Walking away, the city's energy mirrored my inner turbulence, the path ahead veiled in intrigue. Months passed, and New York traded its autumn hues for the stark beauty of winter, with delicate snowflakes swirling outside our apartment windows like silent confetti in the night sky. The city transformed under a blanket of white, the streets glistening under streetlights, and the chill seeping through even the thickest glass. I found myself meeting with teacher more frequently now, 3 times a week, in secluded spots that offered privacy amid the urban sprawl. A tiny studio in Brooklyn with its exposed brick walls and faint echo of subway rumbles, or a modest hotel room downtown under the guise of intensive immersion to justify the extended sessions. These locations felt like hidden pockets in the vast metropolis, away from prying eyes, allowing the lessons to delve deeper without interruption. James was immersed in his embassy work, poring over documents and attending endless meetings in preparation for our trip, his schedule growing more hectic by the day. He barely noticed the increase in my absences, instead beaming with pride at my progress whenever I demonstrated a new phrase over dinner. "You're stringing together full sentences now, Anna." "That's impressive," he'd say, his eyes lighting up as he squeezed my hand across the table, the candlelight reflecting in his glass of scotch. His encouragement fueled me, making the secrecy feel almost justified, a small adventure in our otherwise structured life. I smiled back, masking the growing complexity beneath. In the lessons, teacher introduced fresh elements to build fluency, incorporating role-playing exercises where I had to respond instantaneously to commands, simulating real-life interactions. "Nifuate, follow me," he would intone in that resonant voice, leading me around the room or down a quiet hallway, and I would trail behind, the words taking on a tangible power that made my steps deliberate and attuned. It was as if the language itself was gaining authority, shaping not just my speech but my movements, creating a rhythm that pulsed with unspoken energy. These scenarios sharpened my reflexes, turning abstract vocabulary into instinctive reactions. One particularly frigid afternoon in the Brooklyn studio, with heaters humming against the drafty windows, we practiced market bargaining scenes, haggling over imaginary goods in Swahili. Snow piled up outside, muffling the world, as teacher played the vendor, his expressions vivid and demanding quick retorts from me. I stumbled at first, mixing tenses, but gradually found my footing, the exchange flowing more naturally. The isolation of the space amplified every word, making the lesson feel intimate, a shared world carved out from the city's chaos. James's preoccupation allowed me these escapes without question. One evening, as we bundled up for a walk along the snowy paths of Central Park, he chatted about logistical details for Africa, oblivious to my divided attention. The trees were laced with ice, sparkling under lamps, and our breaths formed clouds in the air. "Your dedication is paying off," he noted warmly, linking arms with me. I nodded, the crunch of snow underfoot echoing my internal conflict, the lessons now a private realm that added layers to my days. Teachers' methods evolved, blending cultural anecdotes with the commands to enrich understanding. In a hotel room overlooking the bustling avenues below, curtains drawn against the winter glare, he recounted snippets of African marketplaces, then had me enact them, "Nunyua hai," by this, gesturing to a prop, insisting on proper bartering phrases. I engaged fully, the role-play drawing me in, the language weaving a spell that made the foreign feel familiar. His guidance was unwavering, correcting with a nod or a repeated command, fostering a dependence on his cues. As winter deepened, the sessions in these hidden venues became my anchor, a contrast to the social whirl of holiday parties James and I attended. At one gala in a midtown ballroom, surrounded by diplomats in tuxedos and gowns, I mingled with ease, but my mind wandered to the latest lesson, where obedience to commands had felt particularly compelling. Sipping champagne, I exchanged pleasantries, yet the echo of Swahili phrases lingered, a secret thrill amid the glittering crowd. One evening, after an exceptionally tense lesson in the studio, where repeated failures to grasp a complex grammatical structure had built frustration to a peak, emotions boiled over in quiet intensity. Teacher approached closer, his presence filling the small space, whispering phrases for me to echo, my voice trembling with the effort. A subtle hint of contact, the warmth of his breath near my ear, it deepened the connection in an instant, etching a mark on my spirit that resonated long after. The room, with its faint scent of paint and dust, seemed charged, the lesson transcending words. The next morning, back in our apartment with snow still falling softly outside, I feigned a headache to James over breakfast, the newspaper spread between us. Just a bit under the weather, I murmured, avoiding his concerned gaze to hide the lingering flush on my cheeks from the previous night's intensity. He kissed my forehead, suggesting rest, and headed to work, his briefcase in hand. Alone, I sipped coffee, the warmth contrasting the chill in my veins, as the fear of exposure began to swell, shadowy like the dim alleys of Harlem at dusk. That fear gnawed subtly, prompting me to double-check messages and schedules, ensuring no overlaps with James's routine. During a session in the hotel, with city sounds muffled by thick walls, teacher sensed my distraction and pressed harder on the role plays, commands like Rudi Nyuma, step back, pulling me back into focus. The obedience steadied me, yet amplified the internal tension, the deepening bond a double-edged sword. James remained enthusiastic, one night as we decorated our tree with twinkling lights, humming carols. Recite something for me, he urged, and I obliged with a simple dialogue, his applause genuine. But inside, the memory of that charged evening stirred unease, the secrecy weighing heavier amid the festive glow. Lessons continued amid blizzards, the studio's warmth a haven where role-plays intensified, navigating hypothetical social scenarios, responding to authority figures in Swahili. Jibu, answer, teacher commanded, and I did, the power dynamic embedding deeper, leaving me reflective on the walks home through snow-covered streets. The hotel sessions offered variety, neutral spaces where immersion felt total. One afternoon, with blinds half drawn, we explored conversational depths, commands interwoven with stories of his past, hints of hardship adding gravity. I followed, the language's hold strengthening, a subtle shift in our interaction. Fear of discovery loomed larger after a close call, James texting during a lesson, inquiring my whereabouts. I replied vaguely about errands, heart racing as teacher waited patiently. The lie settled uneasily, like slush on sidewalks, prompting caution yet not deterring the pull. At home, I masked it well, engaging in our routines, cooking hearty stews against the cold, watching films curled on the couch. James's touch was comforting, yet distant now, my thoughts divided. The deepening connection with teacher left invisible traces, emotions swirling like snowstorms. Another intense session peaked when pronunciation drills frustrated me anew, teacher closing the gap with whispered corrections, the proximity hinting at unspoken layers. The bond solidified, a soulful imprint that followed me into dreams, vivid and insistent. Lying to James became occasional necessity, citing fatigue or migraines to conceal the afterglow. One morning, as he prepared for a meeting, I stayed in bed, the ruse allowing reflection on the growing shadows, the risk amplifying with each encounter. The city's winter rhythm, ice rinks and parks, holiday markets bustling, contrasted my internal storm. Walking to meetings, bundled in coats, I pondered the evolution, the language now a vessel for more than communication. Teachers' tales of Africa wove in, during a studio lesson amid howling winds, enriching commands like, Fika hapa, come here. Obeying, I felt the power, the connection deepening amid shared narratives. James's praise persisted, over wine one evening, toasting my fluency. You're ready for Africa, he said, unaware of the undercurrents. I smiled, the fear a quiet companion, lurking like unseen figures in dimly lit streets. Sessions built momentum, role-plays simulating diplomatic encounters, my responses honed under teacher's gaze. The hotel's anonymity fostered boldness, commands carrying weight that resonated emotionally. After another peak of tension from failed attempts, the whisper and warmth reiterated, strengthening the tie, a mark etched deeper. The aftermath brought flushed introspection, lies to James flowing easier yet heavier. The fear grew, manifesting in cautious glances, deleted messages, a shadow extending like Harlem's intricate paths at twilight. Yet, the allure persisted, drawing me back each time. Winter's grip tightened, but lessons warmed my core, the blend of language and dynamic a secret fire. James planned trips, his excitement contagious, yet my divided loyalties simmered beneath. In reflection, alone with coffee as snow fell, I acknowledged the shift, the language's power, the bond's depth, the looming exposure, a tapestry of emotion unfolding in the city's frozen embrace. The city throbbed with unrelenting vitality, the dazzling lights of Broadway casting kaleidoscopic glows on theatergoers, crowds surging along Wall Street in a symphony of ambition and haste, taxis weaving through like yellow veins. But for me, the vast expanse of New York had contracted sharply, funneling down to those stolen intervals with teacher. Everything else, social gatherings, errands in bustling markets, even quiet evenings with James, faded into a blurred periphery, overshadowed by the anticipation of our meetings. The shift felt insidious, gradual, yet now it defined my days, pulling me toward those moments like a current in the East River. Lessons had migrated to his modest apartment in Queens, a subway ride away from our polished Manhattan world, tucked in a neighborhood of immigrant enclaves where languages blended in the air like spices from corner bodegas. The space was simple, a one-bedroom with threadbare rugs, shelves lined with books in Swahili and English, and walls adorned with carved African masks that stared down with enigmatic expressions, evoking a distant, otherworldly atmosphere amid the distant wail of trains. Stepping inside, I left the city's frenzy behind, entering a realm where time slowed, charged with the intensity of our sessions. The air carried hints of incense and herbal tea, wrapping around me like an embrace from another continent. "Uniffuate, obey me," he commanded in that deep timbre, the words rolling out with authority as we sat cross-legged on the floor, notebooks open between us. I repeated them, my voice gaining strength, feeling the syllables take on a physical weight, as if they could shape actions and wills. The exercises built on this, blending vocabulary with obedience drills, my body responding to the linguistic cues, standing, sitting, moving at his direction. It was exhilarating, this fusion of mind and motion, the language morphing into a tool of control that stirred something primal within me. Each repetition deepened the immersion, leaving me breathless with the power embedded in mere sounds. James noticed the transformations in me, one morning over coffee in our kitchen, the skyline etched against a gray sky outside. "You've become so much more confident, darling. Swahili is doing wonders for you," he remarked, buttering his toast with a smile, his eyes warm with genuine admiration. I murmured agreement, stirring my mug, the compliment landing like a bomb yet stirring guilt beneath. He attributed it to intellectual growth, perhaps a spark of independence, and encouraged more, unaware of the undercurrents. His words bolstered my facade, allowing me to navigate our shared life with renewed poise, even as the lessons reshaped my inner landscape. Internally, though, I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, a storm that raged silently amid the calm of daily routines. Excitement mingled with apprehension, the thrill of progress clashing against the secrecy's weight, like navigating crowded subway cars where one wrong move could expose everything. Lying awake at night, James breathing steadily beside me, I replayed sessions, the commands echoing in my mind, stirring a confusion of desire and doubt. Was this merely learning or something deeper infiltrating my core? The conflict gnawed, yet drew me back, the pull irresistible. During one lesson in his apartment, as afternoon light filtered through thin curtains, casting patterns on the masks, tension escalated from shared recollections of his past, subtle allusions to fleeing Africa, shadows of conflict that haunted his eyes like distant thunder. The air grew thick with unspoken pain, my empathy peaking as he wove these into the language, commands laced with personal gravity. Emotions crested, leading to an intimate dance of submission, where Swahili phrases unlocked hidden yearnings, guiding responses in a rhythm of yield and command. A hint of embrace, the murmur of directives, it fortified the bond in that moment, a profound tether forming amid the vulnerability. The connection solidified, leaving an indelible trace, a warmth that lingered long after I left, subway swaying me back to Manhattan. Yet with it arrived a sharpened threat, the risk amplifying like echoes in empty halls. That evening, as I set my phone on the nightstand, James glanced over casually while undressing, spotting a message on the screen: "Be ready for the next level." His brow furrowed, and he asked lightly, "What's that about?" My heart hammered, but I laughed it off as a motivational note from a fitness app, changing the subject to our weekend plans. He accepted it, chuckling, but the close call lingered, adrenaline surging through me. My pulse raced even after he turned out the light, the city's sirens wailing outside like omens, their urgency mirroring my fear that exposure loomed near, as inevitable as police cruisers patrolling the streets. Sleep evaded me, thoughts spiraling. What if he checked further? The secrecy, once thrilling, now felt precarious, a tightrope over the urban abyss. Morning brought feigned normalcy, but the incident etched caution deeper. Subsequent lessons in Queens carried this shadow, the apartment's masks seeming more watchful as teacher pressed on with advanced role plays, commands like "Kuja Karibu," "Come closer," testing boundaries. I obeyed, the physicality of words intensifying, yet my mind divided, scanning for risks. The bond grew, fueled by shared vulnerabilities, his stories of escape adding layers to our dynamic. James's observations continued, during a dinner party at a colleague's loft, where I conversed with poise, slipping in Swahili anecdotes. "See? It's transforming you," he whispered proudly, his arm around me amid laughter and clinking glasses. I smiled, but the whirlwind inside churned, emotions clashing like traffic at rush hour. The apartment sessions evolved, incorporating artifacts, beads, fabrics from Africa, to contextualize commands, making obedience feel cultural, profound. One evening, as dusk fell over Queens, recollections peaked again, tension mounting into subtle yields, whispers guiding, strengthening ties with hinted closeness. The aftermath brought elation mixed with dread. Back home, vigilance heightened. I deleted messages promptly, fabricating alibis for longer absences. James, buried in work, remained unsuspecting, but the threat hovered, a constant hum like the city's underbelly. Another close encounter, phone buzzing during breakfast, teacher's reminder visible briefly. I snatched it away, claiming a spam alert, heart pounding as James shrugged it off. The proximity of revelation felt suffocating, sirens in the distance amplifying paranoia. The city's pulse, Broadway's neon, Wall Street's frenzy, contrasted my narrowed focus, moments with teacher becoming sanctuaries and snares. Commands empowered, yet enslaved, the physical force of words reshaping me. Internal battles intensified, emotions a vortex, guilt toward James, allure of the forbidden, fear's sharp edge. Reflecting on subway rides, faces blurred around me, I questioned the path, yet continued, drawn inexorably. A lesson amid spring's first hints, windows open to Queen's sounds, past shadows resurfacing, culminating in whispered submissions, bond reinforced through nuanced obedience. Threat loomed larger post-session, a message glimpsed nearly again. James noted confidence anew, over walks in reviving parks, attributing it to linguistic gains. I nodded, whirlwind concealed, the dance of emotions unending. Sessions persisted, apartment's atmosphere immersive, masks witnessing as commands physicalized, strength in surrender. One apex, war's echoes peaking, led to intimate keys unlocking, embrace hinted, commands breathed, connection unyielding. The ensuing threat materialized when James queried a vague text, my deflection buying time, but heart's thunder betrayed inner turmoil, exposure near as street sirens. Vigilance became routine, yet the pull to Queens endured, world's contraction complete, moments with teacher the core amid city's vast indifference. Emotions swirled post-encounter, guilt and exhilaration blending like Queens' diverse streets. James's praise rang hollow, confidence a mask for deeper shifts. In reflection, alone in our apartment, skyline mocking, I acknowledged the precipice, bond strength versus revelation's siren call, the dance continuing. Winter yielded to spring, and New York burst into vibrant life. Central Park's lawns turned a lush green, cherry blossoms scattering petals like confetti on paths where joggers and families picnicked under warming suns. Tourists swarmed the streets, cameras flashing at iconic sites, their voices a babble of accents echoing off skyscrapers. The air carried the scent of blooming flowers mixed with hot pretzels from vendors, a renewal that mirrored the city's endless energy. For me, this seasonal shift brought a heightened urgency, as our trip to Africa loomed closer, passports and itineraries stacking on James's desk like promises of adventure. James, ever the organizer, decided to host a reception in our apartment to build connections before departure, inviting embassy colleagues for an evening of mingling and toasts. He buzzed with excitement, arranging caterers and selecting wines, transforming our space with fresh flowers and ambient lighting that softened the modern edges. "It'll be a great send-off," he said, kissing my cheek as we set the table, his optimism infectious yet underscoring the ticking clock. I nodded, helping with placements, my mind already drifting to the secret rhythms dictating my days. My practice with teacher had intensified to daily encounters, conducted in secrecy across the city's hidden gems, shaded benches in Central Park amid blooming tulips, or quiet corners of cafes where the clatter of dishes masked our whispers. These meetings felt like stolen breaths in the urban rush, the language lessons now a lifeline threaded with deeper implications. He guided me through complex constructions, his voice a steady anchor, pushing fluency toward natural flow. The routine blended seamlessly into my schedule, excuses to James about walks or errands covering the absences. "Mimi and I Mali Yako, I belong to you," I repeated under his tutelage one afternoon in a park alcove, the words slipping from my lips with a weight that transcended mere translation. Surrounded by the chatter of birds and distant laughter, they echoed in my mind long after, resonating like a mantra that stirred unspoken depths. Teacher nodded approval, his eyes holding mine, the phrase embedding itself, an echo that followed me through crowded sidewalks, blending with the honks and shouts of the awakening city. As spring progressed, the lessons in these open yet intimate spaces built layers, incorporating dialogues that simulated African interactions, my responses honed to instinct. In a bustling cafe near Union Square, amid the aroma of fresh coffee and pastries, teacher role-played scenarios, commanding phrases that demanded immediate obedience. I complied, the words gaining potency, my thoughts increasingly occupied by their implications, a subtle possession taking hold amid the neutral backdrop. James prepared for the reception meticulously, one evening reviewing guest lists while I arranged seating, the apartment filling with the scent of appetizers warming in the oven. "Your Swahili will impress them," he remarked confidently, unaware of the daily immersions fueling it. I smiled, stirring a dip, the compliment landing amid my divided loyalties, the secret practices a shadow play behind our domestic harmony. Daily meetings with teacher varied locales, a serene spot by the Hudson, waves lapping as we practiced, or a tucked-away booth in a diner, steam from teacups rising like veils. "Karibu, welcome," he'd begin, drawing me into the linguistic world, the frequency amplifying the bond, phrases like keys unlocking inner chambers. The spring air invigorated, yet carried a tension, the approaching trip heightening stakes. One session peaked in emotional intensity, seated on a park bench as teacher shared fragments of his dark past, fleeting from persecution, the terror of pursuit etched in his tone like scars. The revelation built a storm within, emotions surging to a crescendo, culminating in a scene of utter submission, Swahili directives guiding a complete yield that hinted at the profound layers of our connection. The moment left me shaken, the depth reverberating through me like aftershocks. Consequences unfolded swiftly, back home, reality blurred, phrases murmuring from my lips in sleep, fragments escaping into the night. James stirred one such evening, hearing the whispers, but dismissed them as fatigue from preparations, tucking the blanket around me with concern. "Get some rest, darling," he murmured, his touch grounding yet oblivious, the incident a crack in the facade I hastily mended. The threat of unmasking loomed larger, hanging like brooding storm clouds over the Hudson, their gray masses reflecting my mounting dread. Teacher warned during our next cafe meeting, his voice low amid clinking cups, "One misstep, and it all crumbles." I nodded, the words sinking in, awareness sharp that the secret teetered on exposure's edge, the daily rituals now fraught with peril. Preparations for the reception consumed James, florists delivering bouquets that filled our space with spring's fragrance, while I navigated the duality, lessons in parks where tourists snapped photos nearby. "Asante, thank you," I practiced, but heavier phrases lingered, echoing in thoughts during mundane tasks like grocery runs amid blooming street markets. The emotional explosion's aftermath lingered, submission's hint deepening the tie, my days infused with a haze where Swahili blended with English in inner monologues. At an embassy luncheon, I conversed politely, but mind wandered to the park's intensity, the connection a silent undercurrent amid diplomatic chatter. James overheard more nocturnal mutterings, attributing to stress from the impending move, suggesting herbal tea before bed. His kindness amplified guilt, the blurring realities a warning sign I couldn't ignore, yet the pull to daily practices endured. Storm clouds gathered literally one afternoon, mirroring the metaphorical threat as I met teacher in a sheltered cafe, rain pattering outside. His caution echoed, careful steps, reinforcing the fragility, my nod acknowledging the brink we danced upon. The reception neared, invitations sent, our apartment polished to shine, James envisioning networking triumphs. I assisted with menus, mind replaying the peak moment, submission's completeness a haunting echo, consequences rippling through dreams and waking hours. Daily immersions continued, shifting to less exposed cafes as paranoia grew, phrases like, Mimi ni mali yako, resonating deeper, a possession felt in solitude walks through greening streets. The secret's pressure built, exposure's cloud darkening horizons. James's dismissal of my sleep talk eased temporarily, but seeded doubt. One morning over breakfast, he joked about my midnight lessons, my laugh forced, heart racing at the near miss. The threat solidified, like thunder rumbling distant yet approaching. Teachers' stories of persecution wove into more sessions, building tensions that hinted at further yields, the bond's depth a double bind. In a park amid spring revelers, emotions simmered, submission's echo lingering, consequences immediate in confused reveries. The apartment buzzed with pre-party energy, deliveries arriving, James coordinating seamlessly. I feigned enthusiasm, internal storm brewing, the secret on the verge, one slip away from unraveling under gathering clouds. Nocturnal phrases escaped again, James stirring but soothing himself with explanations of excitement overload. His trust frayed my nerves, the blurring intensifying, daily lessons a refuge and risk. Warned anew in a cafe, rain now pouring, teacher's grave tone underscored the precipice, everything hangs by a thread. I absorbed it, nodding, the knowledge that revelation loomed transforming each step into caution. Spring's bloom contrasted my turmoil, Central Park's vitality a backdrop to secret meetings where phrases owned me, echoes persistent. The reception loomed as a potential flashpoint, secrets bubbling beneath. Emotional peaks recurred subtly, past shadows evoking yields that deepen ties, hints of completeness leaving marks. Consequences, more sleep murmurs, James's growing but unspoken curiosity, fatigue his convenient excuse. Clouds over the Hudson mirrored the overhang, threat palpable as sirens in the distance. Daily practices persisted, but with heightened vigilance, the secret straining at seams, ready to burst forth. The diplomatic reception unfolded in the opulent ballroom of a grand hotel on Manhattan, crystal chandeliers casting a golden shimmer over the assembled guests, where champagne flowed endlessly from silver trays carried by uniformed waiters. The air buzzed with conversations on global politics, men in crisp tuxedos and women in elegant gowns mingling like pieces on a chessboard of influence. I stood beside James, my arm linked with his, dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged my figure, my light hair swept into an updo. The room's grandeur, marble floors, towering floral arrangements, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner, felt both exhilarating and overwhelming, a culmination of our preparations for Africa. James chatted animatedly with a senator, his laughter genuine, while I scanned the crowd, nerves fluttering like the bubbles in my flute. The African ambassador approached us with a warm smile, his traditional attire a splash of color amid the monochrome suits, extending a hand in greeting. "I've heard you're studying Swahili," he said, his voice rich with an accent that evoked distant savannas. "Impressive for a diplomat's wife. Try saying something, let's see your progress." My heart skipped, a mix of pride and anxiety surging as I nodded politely. The request hung in the air, spotlighting me amid the elite chatter, and I felt the weight of expectations from James's encouraging squeeze on my arm. The ballroom's hum seemed to quiet in my mind, focusing on this pivotal moment. Nervously, I glanced toward the bar, where polished glasses clinked and liquids poured in graceful arcs, and there he was, teacher, disguised in a waiter's vest, his tall frame moving with quiet efficiency among the bottles. Hired for extra work, his presence here was a shocking intrusion, our secret worlds colliding like tectonic plates. His eyes met mine briefly, dark and knowing, sending a jolt through me. Without thinking, my lips formed the words that had been drilled into me, Mimi and I Mali Bwana wangu, I belong to my master, directed straight at him, the phrase escaping as if compelled by an invisible force. The ambassador chuckled, patting James on the shoulder. An interesting choice for a diplomatic wife. James grinned broadly, clueless to the true meaning, his pride evident as he turned to me. See? She succeeded brilliantly, he exclaimed, raising his glass in a mini toast, the guests nearby nodding approvingly. But the ambassador's laughter faded into a frown, his expression shifting to one of subtle concern as he leaned closer to James, whispering the translation in a low tone that cut through the ambient noise. I watched in frozen horror, the room's elegance suddenly suffocating, as James's face drained of color, his eyes widening in disbelief. The quartet's melody continued obliviously, but for me, time stretched, the revelation hanging like a guillotine. The evening spiraled into chaos from there, the polished facade cracking under the weight of truth. James pulled me aside to a quiet alcove near the windows, overlooking the twinkling city lights, his voice a harsh whisper laced with fury. What the hell does that mean, Anna? Belonging to your master, he demanded, his grip on my arm tight, eyes searching mine for denial. I stammered explanations, about the lesson's intensity, teachers' manipulative methods, how phrases had been twisted in role-plays, but he waved them away, rage building like a storm. Accusations flew, infidelity, betrayal, his trust shattered in an instant. Guests glanced curiously, whispers spreading like ripples, the reception's joy tainted by our private implosion. Back at the apartment later, the scandal's aftermath unfolded in raw confrontation, the space that once felt like home now echoing with anger. James paced the living room, discarding his tie onto the couch, his face flushed as he pieced together clues, late returns, secretive texts, my sleep murmurs. How long has this been going on? He roared, not waiting for answers, labeling it all as deceit. I pleaded, tears streaming, detailing how the lessons had evolved into something controlling, teachers past influencing his dominance, but James heard only excuses, his mind closed. He declared it over, packing a bag with mechanical fury, vowing to excise me from his life like a flawed document. In the days that followed, isolation descended swiftly, the city's vastness amplifying my solitude. James moved to a hotel, blocking my calls, his departure to Africa accelerated without me, leaving on a flight I watched from afar via airport updates. Colleagues' sympathetic yet distant messages hinted at ruined reputation, whispers of scandal rippling through diplomatic circles, painting me as the unfaithful wife. Friends drifted, invitations ceased, the social web unraveling thread by thread. I wandered Central Park alone, spring's bloom mocking my desolation, benches where lessons once occurred now empty echoes of loss. Teacher vanished almost immediately after the reception, his apartment in Queens cleared out overnight, no forwarding address, as if he'd anticipated the fallout. I learned later he'd returned to Africa, funded by the secret sums I'd slipped him, gifts meant to aid his struggles, now twisted into tools of escape. His warnings rang hollow in hindsight, a manipulator fleeing the wreckage he'd helped create. Calls to his number went unanswered, leaving me grappling with betrayal's double sting, his influence a ghost haunting my thoughts. The injustice struck like a cold Atlantic wind whipping through the streets, chilling to the bone amid towering skyscrapers that loomed indifferent. Why me, left bearing the blame while others escaped unscathed? James flew solo to his dream posting, ignoring my desperate pleas via emails that bounced back unread, his career intact, mine in tatters. I paced our, now my, empty apartment, echoes of laughter replaced by silence, questioning how obedience to words had led to this ruin. The city's pulse continued outside, relentless, but I felt adrift, a castaway in its sea of lights. Nights brought restless reflections, staring at the ceiling as sirens wailed below, piecing together the manipulation's web. Teacher's commands, once empowering, now revealed as chains, his dark past a lever for control. James's refusal to listen amplified the unfairness, his anger blinding him to nuances, society quick to judge the woman. I sipped tea alone at the kitchen table where it all began, the memory of that first message a bitter irony, the harmony shattered irreparably. Days blurred into a haze of survival, job hunts in cafes where anonymity offered respite, resumes highlighting skills now tainted by rumor. Friends' condolences rang false, their distance a subtle condemnation, leaving me to navigate the wreckage solo. The park's green expanses, once sites of secret growth, now paths of regret, each step echoing lost confidence. News of James's successful arrival in Africa trickled through mutual contacts, his posts on social media, carefully curated, showing him thriving, while I grappled with bills in a half-empty home. The disparity fueled rage, his escape from accountability a glaring inequity, my pleas lost in the digital void. Teacher's disappearance cemented the asymmetry, his return funded by my naivety, leaving me penniless in spirit. The cold wind persisted metaphorically, sweeping through my days as I rode subways crowded with strangers, their indifference mirroring the world's. Reputation in ruins, opportunities slammed shut, I contemplated reinvention, but the stain lingered, a scarlet letter in elite circles. In quiet moments, overlooking the Hudson's flow, I mourned the injustice, vowing silent resilience amid the betrayal's aftermath. Solitude deepened, evenings spent with books that once inspired, now distractions from the void. James's final words echoed, "You're out of my life," a dismissal without appeal, his flight to Africa a door slammed eternally. Teacher's shadow faded, but the manipulation scar remained, a lesson in trust's fragility. The city's skyscrapers stood sentinel, their heights a reminder of fallen grace, the wind's chill a constant companion in my isolation. Injustice burned, provoking thoughts of what-ifs, the scandal's unfair tilt leaving me to rebuild from ashes, alone in the metropolis's unforgiving embrace. Reflections turned to action, tentative steps toward therapy sessions in modest offices, unpacking the control's layers without explicit details. The process unearthed strength, but the wound's rawness persisted, James's ignorance a perpetual sting, teacher's flight a thief's victory. Months later, as summer approached, the apartment sold under duress, proceeds divided unevenly and hasty divorce papers served cold. I relocated to a smaller space in Brooklyn, the move a fresh start marred by lingering shadows, reputations damaged trailing like exhaust. The wind from the Atlantic gusted stronger on exposed walks, symbolizing the relentless unfairness, my pleas ignored, lives diverged unjustly. Amid new routines, cafe jobs, language classes in reverse, I harbored the outrage, a fuel for unspoken discussions in my mind. Finally, acceptance crept in, the skyscraper's silhouettes at dusk a canvas for resolve, the solitude a forge for independence, though the injustice's echo never fully silenced, a cold reminder in the city's heart.